it is a real pleasure to welcome you all and to introduce my friend and colleague, Professor Bruno Cabanes. So before telling you more about Professor Cabanes and his work, I'd like to take a moment to thank the people and institutions who made today's event possible. Many thanks to the Department of History, and in particular to his chair, Professor Scott Levi, for their support. We appreciate it very much. Thank you so much to the staff of the Center of Excellence for their tireless efforts, and thank you as well to the French Consulate in Chicago for their generous partnership. Their collaboration reminds us how vital it is to foster dialogue across disciplines and across borders, a dialogue that today's event perfectly embodies. So Professor Bruno Cabanes is a distinguished historian, currently holding the Donald and Mary Dunn Chair in Modern History at The Ohio State University, after teaching for nearly a decade at Yale University. A specialist of World War I and its aftermath, particularly the transition from war to peace, he has authored numerous books on 20th century warfare and its cultural dimensions, including August 1914, France, the Great War, and A Month That Changed the World Forever, published by Yale University Press, and The Great War and the Origins of Humanitarianism, 1918-1924, published by Cambridge University Press. More recently, has edited Une histoire de la guerre du 19e siècle à nos jours at Le Seuil, a work translated into 4 languages, and written major works on humanitarian photography and the material culture of war. Yet, the book we are discussing today, Les fantômes de l'île de Peleliu, marks a turning point in his intellectual journey. While rooted in historical research, it ventures into new terrain, geographically, by taking us to a Micronesian island, historically by focusing on the Pacific War, and stylistically by embracing the American tradition of narrative nonfiction. In this work, Professor Cabanes follows in the footsteps of Eugene Sledge, an American Marine whose memoirs haunt his investigation, while building his own archive during his stay on the island, blending his imagination with that of the warriors and inhabitants of the Palau archipelago. It is therefore fitting that Les fantômes de l'île de Peleliu was published in the Fiction et Compagnie collection at Editions du Seuil. Founded in 1974 by Denis Roche, this series has long championed hybrid literary forms that blur the boundaries between fiction and scholarship. Under the direction of Bernard Comment, since 2004, Fiction and Company continues to cultivate bold, risk-taking works that expand our understanding of what literature can do. Please join me in welcoming Professor Cabanes. It's a real pleasure to have him with us today. Okay. So we're going to chat for a little bit, for about 40 minutes, I would say, before giving you the chance to interact with the audience. Let me start with a basic question that many people in this room who know you and your work probably have in mind. Why does a historian of World War I and its aftermath get interested in the Pacific War and the young US Marine, Eugene Sledge? Put differently, could you please let us know a little bit more about your intellectual journey and the origins of your research, and also tell us more about the general topic of your book?
Thank you, Benjamin. Let me start by thanking you for engaging in the conversation with me. It's really a great honor to, and also thank you all for being here, and thank you to the History Department, because the Merchant Center, it would have been, of course, impossible to have this long research of several years. So your question about the intellectual journey, that started a long time ago. I started thinking about that project, I would say 19 years ago, in 2006. And I started really researching it 11 years ago. I started writing it 4 years ago, and I spent 6 months revising it for that series that you presented, Fiction et Compagnie, because it was a totally different project once the manuscript was accepted by Bernard Comment for that series. So, as you mentioned, I'm an historian of World War I, so it was a new time period. It was a new space. honestly, in terms of travel, in terms of engaging with that space, getting to know it, understand it, the Pacific, radically different from, of course, Europe or the US. And it was a different methodology. I tried to combine history with anthropology, and also a different form of writing, as you also mentioned. I think it's an integral part of that project. The way I built my narrative, and we're going to talk about that, of course. It's the topic of this talk today. So I will say that at the very beginning, it's a form of experience of disorientation. Being completely disoriented. And I think the very first sentence of the book is really about that. The first sentence of the book is the following. La première fois que je suis allé à Peleliu, ne sachant que regarder, je n'ai rien vu. The first time I went to Peleliu, not knowing what to look for, I saw nothing, right? So it's really about that. It's about seeing nothing at the beginning and progressively building your own research, your own topic, right? So disorientation, which I think is in many ways important for historians to feel disoriented. Maybe that's, when you turn whatever, at some point when you get older, I think it's also important to start a new project, totally different from what I've done until now. So the very beginning, and I want to say that to the many students, many undergrads were here, and graduate students as well. It's actually a student who came to see me in 2006 at the end of one of my classes. I was at Yale, and an undergrad I didn't know, and I must admit honestly that I don't remember his name, and I owe him a lot because I owe him really this book. Came to see me in 2006, saying like, I was teaching that class on the Exchange of War, saying you should read that. And that was Eugene Sledge's memoir, With the Old Brit at Peleliu and Okinawa. I was a relatively young French historian, speaking with the same French accents, and coming from France, newly arrived from France. You know that. I mean, like when you, first of all, I was a specialist of World War I, and for most Europeans, most French, the history of World War II is focused on Europe. It's a question of invasion, occupation, resistance, and collaboration, right? And in many ways, that book brought me to a topic I didn't know much about. I didn't know the Battle of Peleliu, almost nothing about it. I didn't know Sledge, and I didn't know much about the Pacific War as well. So I went to the Sterling Library, and I spent the afternoon reading that amazing book. And when I say amazing, it's for several reasons. It's the style, yes. It's the way it's written. It's very plain. It's very realistic, but very plain. It's not Norman Mailer. It's not the Naked and the Dead. It's not that level, but it's really very honestly written. But it's more two things. I say that honesty, right? He's not trying to build the myth of the good war. He's honest. He's honest about war violence. And when I say we're going to talk about that, it's actually extreme violence that includes mutilation of bodies, that includes really some kind of very ugly acts of violence, mutual, of course, right? So honesty and empathy for his comrades in arms, right? Empathy. And I was really impressed by him. By the way he was able to approach that experience. Empathy for his comrades, when he will have been able to say, okay, I saw that, I saw what they did, but I'm not denouncing anything, but I was not part of it. And he does not create any kind of gap between his friends and himself. He's honest and empathetic, right? Not towards the Japanese, right, at all. I mean, I will tell you a story about that. I got a letter a month ago, maybe. I get now letters and emails from friends, from colleagues who know that this book was published in French, and hopefully soon in English and in Japanese as well. And I got a letter from a colleague in Florida who told me, well, by the way, I have a letter from my grandfather who, in my grandfather's collection that he received from Sledge a long time ago. So he could have told me that before. That would be something I could have included in my book. And the letter is absolutely fascinating. It's a long description, thank God, Sledge wrote long responses to the people who wrote to him. So he writes a letter to my friend's grandfather, and it's a long, realistic description, honest description of the battle. And at some point he says, as for our former enemies, I wish them only one thing, go to hell. And it's a letter that was written in the 1990s. He died in 2001, right? So the level of hatred, well, what is funny about that is that in the margins, my friend's grandfather says something like, oh, I no longer buy Japanese cars, but I don't have the same level of hatred towards the Japanese. Right? Anyway, so he was empathetic for his friends, but not, of course, for the Japananese. And I was also immediately struck by, so that's the cover. They made an amazing job it's an artist who did that. It's, of course, as you remember, you can imagine the Peleliu. But here's what I found at the back of the book. That's a very famous of Eugene Sledge after Okinawa, right, in 45, and he's 21. And I can say in many ways that 20 years later, I'm still haunted by that photograph of this young man with his 1,000-yard stare that reminds me of Don McCullin's photographs of the Vietnam War, and also Tom Lee's drawings of Peleliu. This kind of dissociation, and of course, trauma that is clearly that you can see on his face, right? And what struck me is that so let me move on. So I read the book. And I said, okay, I'm going to do something about that at some point, right? Then I moved to OSU, and I decided to go to Auburn. Auburn University is where Sledge left his archives. Well, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, there was a description, of course, as always, of the archives, but I found some amazing things. I found letters that he wrote to his parents almost every day, and that he received from his parents. And that's fascinating because you can see that his writing changes. There's a before and after Peleliu. I mean, you cannot recognize his writing. It's different, radically different. What I found also is, the usual object is uniform, is kabar, some relics of the Japanese flags and things like that many GIs brought back, or Marines brought back from the Pacific War. And what I found, and did not expect to find, were hundreds of letters written by veterans who, after the book was published in 81, and after it was published again by Oxford in the 1990s, wrote to him almost as a form of community mourning, because they were asking actually about news from comrades who had completely disappeared, right? Asking him to share news, of course praising his description of the battle. So that was an amazing material about the reception, of course, of the book. So that's when I decided to go. I was in Auburn, I went to Mobile. He was from Mobile. His father was a doctor, a veteran of World War I. I went to his grave. I went to his former high school, and an amazing librarian found another picture of him when he was 18, and that's not the same person. He looks totally different. And then I decided to go to Peleliu, and to travel there. And try to...
I believe you were there 4 times, right?
I was there, yeah. I went to Palau 3 times, and I went to Japan 4 times, right? I was lucky enough to have Cam Gibbons as my research assistant. It was very fantastic. And I went there to not knowing, as I said, what to expect, right? Totally different environments. And asking questions. I think there were 2 questions, or 2 main concerns. The first one was, how do you survive Peleliu, right? What is the price to pay? What is the price to pay? Because, I knew that for him the price to pay was literally nightmares every night. That was his to children say about him is that he suffered from nightmares until the end of his life. He writes about that. He says that, and that's Sledge again in the 1980s, writing about this experience. He writes that something in me died in Peleliu, the belief in the goodness of every human being, right? That's a very strong sense of disillusionment. The other thing I was most obsessed with was actually the fragility of humanity, right? And I was thinking of what the German film director Werner Herzog, whom you may know, says about that. He writes, and I think it's just beautiful, that civilization is like a thin layer of ice upon a deep ocean of chaos and darkness, right? So the fragility of humanity, the fragility of civilization, but also at the same time the strength of resilience, and you can see that for Sledge. Also these atrocity-producing situations that can let people like him, ordinary Americans, good guys, to switch, and he admits that himself, to the situation where they commit atrocities, right? And they respond, of course, to atrocities committed by the Japanese. That was really my point, right? That was because I work on veterans. That was my main preoccupation, and that's how I started building my narrative. It's a long response to your question from the genocide.
But very interesting. Thank you so much. So at the beginning of our conversation, you just said that when you first went to Peleliu, you didn't know what to see, basically. When did that change? Because you said you went there 3 times. Was there particularly an event that triggered a change in your perspective? Was it perhaps the fact that you were traveling with a student? Because I believe at the end of your book, in the acknowledgement, you pay a tribute to Cameron, who was there with you and helped you to see differently, as you say. So was there like a moment, a kind of epiphany that changed your perspective?
Well, epiphany maybe not, but yes, long conversations, for sure. Long conversations, processing what I was seeing, trying again to turn that into a historical narrative, right? That there's a whole process of writing beyond that.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that precisely? Because I'm a literary person, I'm a novelist, and what I found particularly interesting in your work is that how literary it is. I've read also quite a few of the reviews that were dedicated to your work in the French press, and many people precisely admire the literary qualities of your work. I think you had a review that said something about your book being a kind of poem in prose, something like that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, about this literary quality of the book? How would you first perhaps characterize it from a generic point of view? Is that an historical work? Is that non-fiction? Is it a learned fiction where you use your skills as an historian, but it's more like pointing towards a literary work? How do you define this this peculiar object?
First of all, reviewers have been very generous. That's true in France. People I didn't know, and people were totally outside of the field. And as you can imagine, I was very, worried about the reception by non-historians. How can I respond to your question? I think let me say that when we travel and when we do research, I'm always thinking of Tim O'Brien's the topic about the title of his book, The Things They Carried, right? I mean, what are the things we carry when we do research, right? And I think in many ways the imaginary is essential. You cannot travel. You can, of course, travel to Peleliu, but what's the point of traveling to Peleliu if you are not, or if you are an archaeologist, maybe, but you are also an archaeologist, you have also your own imaginary. So I was in a way traveling with my own imaginary, and that's a combination of several things. And because behind Peleliu, so let me show you Peleliu first. I mean, I'm sure that people want to. Yeah, so just for those who don't know much about the island itself, so let me start with the archipelago. No, here we go. So here you have the archipelago. It's as you see, it's 1,400 kilometers east of the Philippines, of Manila, more precisely. It's lost in the middle of nowhere. It means that's very Western to say that, right? Of course. But and it's composed of more than 300 islands The main one, Bab el-Darb, is pretty large. It's where core is located. That's this one, right? So it takes forever. Oops, sorry. It takes forever to. It doesn't work. It takes forever to go there. It takes 24 hours, more or less. You have to travel to Tokyo, then to Guam or to Manila. Then you arrive in the middle of the night, right? So I mean, it's exhausting. In core, here, right? You see core. And then that's where the main airport is. And then you take a boat to Peleliu. It takes 90 minutes, 2 hours sometimes, to Peleliu, and then there's Angkor, a small island here where there was a battle also in Angkor that started a few days after the Battle of Peleliu. So Battle of Peleliu starts on September 15th, 1944, ends on November 27th, and that's Peleliu. That's the island, that's the landing beaches in the southwest, white and orange beaches. White, where the first Marines landed, the 5th and the 7th landed on Orange Beach. The airfield, which is of course the main target at that time, and progressively those went pretty easily in the first days. The main pocket of resistance was around you can see that here, the mountain Umur-Brogol. Umur-Brogol is actually an American word, right? Someone wrote to me, it's like, oh, it's too bad that I completely missed that. Like when I hear Umur-Brogol, that looks like a mask, the apocalypse, right? It's a word that refers a mask to the apocalypse. Gezebus, where Sledge fought as well. For those who have read the memoir, that's where the mutilations take place, and we also went to Gezebus. And if you want to see Peleliu, that's it. That's Peleliu. That's Peleliu from. I'm
surprised that you went there 3 times. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Well, that looks beautiful.
Is it why you chose that topic in the first place?
Sorry?
Is it why you chose that topic?
No, that's from the top of Bloodiness Ridge. So you see the jungle, you see the mangrove, and you see in Gezebus here, the top, right? That's where the little island where the famous scene from with the old Brit took place. Show you more. That's in Gezebus. That's a pillbox, American pillbox. I don't know if it's I don't think it's the one where because we were able to identify the pillbox where that is described in Sledge's book. How do we know that? That's because a guide, Godwin, went there. I think it was 5 years before we went there, and he went there with one of Sledge's sons. And after doing some research, we were able to identify the pillbox. It took them forever. I had to go there twice go there twice was kind of difficult because that looks okay, but exploring the jungle is kind of a challenge. So that's one of the many American pillboxes on Gezebus Island, and that's a 1,000-man cave, which was actually turned into an hospital by the Japanese during the battle. You see, you could almost write a story of the battle with you find 2 things. You find many things, but you find battles of sake and battles of coke. But as left there, you cannot, of course, they are protected, but it's in the cave, and you see many explosives. There are still 90,000 unexploded explosives so you need to be very careful, of course. I remember Pete sending me a message the first time I went to Peleliu saying, okay, be careful. Honestly, and coming from Pete, I know that's good advice. I was like, okay, I was careful, and yes, there are lots of explosives, but they were, so an NGO worked on the island to demine some of them, that they're running out of money, so they stopped. Okay, and I will come back to that later. So, the imaginary, right? You go there and you see it's very, very impressive. You go there and what you carry is your own imaginary. You carry, of course, an imaginary of the deserted island, right? You know that better than anyone here, anyone else. You work on the 18th century. So Robinson Crusoe, right? And there was a story in 1783 of a ship, the Antelope, there's a shipwreck that happened in August 1783. So the first encounter of Westerners with the Palauans in 1783. The chief, the story is told by George Keats. That became a bestseller. Believe it or not, in the 18th century, Peleliu was known by many, many people because that book was translated into 12 languages. And the story is about, the chief's son sent to London, who died actually of smallpox in London. So there's the imagery of the 18th century, there's the imagery of the 19th century, these islands that were part of the German Empire from 1898 to World War I. I totally forgot, being a specialist of World War I, that there was also World War I in the Pacific, of course, that is almost totally forgotten.
Which you mentioned at the beginning of the book. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chapters. So yeah, so you went there with that cultural background and literary background as well. But what about the literary process? You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that you worked on this book for at least 6 months on the really final version. I'm really curious to know more about the process itself and how it might have been different from a book like La Victoire Andouillée out August 1914, for example. Did you see a difference in the way you approached the literary process of that particular book?
Yes, so there were two challenges. The first one was to capture this disorientation, right? So what to do with that, right? Capture the essence of the battle, this specific form of violence in the Pacific, and capture the environment. It's a book about the environment, right? In many ways. And also build a narrative that was actually a combination of a travelogue combining 3 or 4 trips in one, and Eugene Sledge's story, right? So my point was literally to follow Eugene Sledge, but also to make the reader understand every time I was seeing something personally, to dig, because my question was not simply the story of the battle, but also the different layers, right? The battle, but also the memory of the Japanese colonization, the memory of the German colonization, the memory of the 18th century, so try to capture that. And in many ways, the way, to respond to your question, that was a form of fragmentation, right? Short chapters and constantly changing the perspective to make the readers understand the complexity of the different layers. And not simplify everything by telling only the story of the Battle of Peleliu, but has been told many, many times by excellent military historians.
And there is a great novelty in that book too.
Right.
Which is Bruno Cabanes himself as a kind of character in the story, and that's very different from your previous books as well, right? So there is a jeu, there is an actor speaking for himself throughout the narrative, and there is also a little bit the story of not only how Sledge changed, but how you changed as well too. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, about the difficulties you may have encountered as an historian to use
the risk was the risk was a risk of obscenity, again. I mean, you are talking about a battle where the Americans lost 2,000 people, more or less, 2,000 men. The Japanese lost 11,000 men, right? And in a situation where many atrocities were, of course, committed. So, yes, I needed to be there, because that was the point. But I didn't want to be there too much. The point about being there was a form of archaeology, right? And archaeology in a way that I was not so much interested only in the different layers, like digging deeper and deeper. That was not, I'm not an archaeologist. The key question is the presence of the past in the present, right? The presence of the past in the present. The presence for us, and we can talk about that if you want in a moment. The presence, of course, of this battle today, really, literally today, and can give you examples of that. It's not the past, it was 44, but still present in many ways today. The presence of the Japanese colonization, the presence of the German colonization, and the presence even of the 18th century story, right? So digging, but to study the presence of this past today. And if you want to do that, you need to be there, because the only person who does that is, of course, the narrator, right? So that's why I'm present in in the book, describing my discoveries, literally. It's I think, I hope for the readers also a way to, I mean, I cannot bring everyone, of course, but bring my readers with me to these distant islands that, by the way, now are very difficult. I mean, it's almost impossible to access them because it has been turned into a military base.
So, with my next question, I would like to talk a little bit about something you briefly mentioned, which is the critique of the American myth of the good war, sanitized memory of World War II.
Yeah.
So how does studying Peleliu, a long neglected battle, challenge that heroic narrative? Did you face resistance in the US or elsewhere when trying to complicate precisely the image of the Marines and highlight the violence or even at times the barbarity of the fight?
Well, in fact, I didn't see any resistance. I didn't encounter any resistance yet. We'll see when the book gets translated. I think that will be more problematic in Japan, honestly. I'm going to Tokyo in June to present the book. It won't be translated, of course, in June, but and the French version of the book at the Maison Franco-Japonaise in Tokyo and in two universities in Tokyo. I'm really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to the feedback, to the reactions of the Japanese audience. So we can talk about that if you want. For the Americans, the story of the good war, and even the notion of the good war, right? The good war for us, it's like almost a sanitized version of World War II with a form of downplaying atrocities and turning, you know, the greatest generation into heroes, right? And they are, for many of them, hold the Dunn chair. Dunn was a hero of World War II. That said, the memory of World War II has always been very complex. So if you want like a perfect example of the good war, take The Sense of Iwo Jima, right? It's a film of 1950, and the John Wayne syndrome that was still very present in Vietnam. This idealization of that generation was very, very important, right? That said, if you take a film of 46, The Best Years of Our Lives, you see how complex it was to return from World War II, right, for many. And after that, you see also many films in the 50s that present PTSD, well, not PTSD, but combat fatigue at that time, as the experience of many veterans, right? So it has always been complex. My point is that when the book is published, when We Will Brace is published in 81, it's almost totally ignored, except by a few veterans, but it's ignored. It's in 1990, because John Keegan writes an amazing book review of We Will Brace, that it becomes, again, recognized as a major piece, major memoir on World War II. And in many ways, I was wondering what would happen today. My personal sense is that we live in a time of regression, and that in many ways, if the book was published today, probably it will not be well received. I don't know if everybody will agree about that, but we need, and I think we I don't know why, but we need that myth of the good war and the greatest generation. And again, many books that show how complex it was will probably not be well received today, most probably, right? So I don't know, again. It's a book about the complexities that are actually in Sledge's book. It's not, I'm not making anything up. It's part of Sledge's book, but it's a narrative that again, will not be well accepted. Japan, it's different. Japan, it's different because, again, it's a defeat, number one. And it's a memory that has never been shared, never been transmitted from the generation of the veterans of World War II to the veterans, to their sons or to their children or grandchildren. Just to give you an example, my translator was amazing, but without her, I would have been, of course, unable to do research in Japan. She told me she's in her 50s. Her father was a child during World War II in Tokyo, lived in Tokyo. And she told me that because I was doing this work with her, it was the first time she was discussing World War II with her father, first time, right? So you see how complex it is. And if you go to many museums in Japan, there is a clearly revisionist, we'll say negationist history denying the war crimes committed by the Japanese. I mean, it's not part of public history, right?
So earlier you were talking about the presence of the past, but anyways, it's much more the absence of the past, not only in Japan, but also in the Palaus as well, because you dedicate quite a few chapters to the local population, and you explain how those populations did not really consider the war as something that happened.
That's very true.
But much more as something that happened in their territory in a way. And they were.
That's very true, Benjamin, and that's fascinating. That's fascinating. That's why what makes me kind of pessimistic. It's far, it's forgotten, and it's forgotten by the Palauans themselves. When I was, as always, extremely naive when I came here. When I went to Palau the first time, I asked my guide, Godwin. One of the first questions I asked him was like, how does this history, how is it taught in schools, at schools, right? And he told me, well, it's not taught. I mean, it's not part of history lessons because this is not our history, right?
I mean, they describe it as a kind of typhoon, right?
Yeah, so that's another thing. Yeah, that's another thing. But for the Palauans, so let me say what happened to these Palauans. So the population. So first of all, today there are 500 people who live in Peleliu on the island. So of course, immediately when you get there, when you are identified, I remember the first time I went there, seeing someone. I mean, you don't see anyone, or you. Where there are bikes, right? I mean, and didn't see many people. At some point, you see someone and say, okay, oh yes, yeah, you took that boat, last week. I know, yeah, my sister saw you. Okay, so I mean, you are clearly identified. These people live in the north of the island because that's something you need to know. They are in exile on their own island. It's an island filled with explosives, right? So when they were finally allowed to come back at the end of 45, they were literally, so the Americans built a village. It's still the same village in the north, and it's heartbreaking. There were hamlets everywhere. There were little villages along the coast. Everything has been destroyed by the battle. Everything. So it reminded me of World War I, this village mort pour la France, like the villages near Verdun, who literally were completely destroyed. So you see little signs with the name of the hamlet, and and you see that like almost a sign of the pre-war life. And nobody's there, of course. So it's not only actually the villages and the houses, but it's also the tombs of the ancestors who were actually buried there, and it's a major ritual crisis. So for the Palauans, that's this experience. Most of them were in 44 moved to the main islands, Bab el Darb, before so they participated in the defense of the construction of bunkers and the fortification of the caves. But they were moved out of the islands, not for humanitarian reasons. I mean, the Japanese didn't care. They wanted them to, they turned them into slaves to work for them on the main islands. Most of them died. They died of hunger because of the blockades organized by the Americans. So it's a completely different war experience on the main islands, and that's something we know because of actually whole histories made in the 60s and 70s by Americans who went to Palau to interview survivors, right? So, I mean, it's part of your question, but the big problem is that we all want to write military history, and combine different perspectives, right? Not only the victors, but the vanquished, so I don't know if there is any victor here, but the Americans, the Japanese, the Palauans. The Americans, we have, of course, memoirs. Sledge is one of them, there are others, right? The Japanese, that becomes difficult. Why? Because again, you have 12,000 Japanese men who participated in the battle. More than 11,000 died. Some of them are still there. They were buried alive in the caves, right? So the bodies are still there, in caves with explosives, so they will remain there forever. That's why I say it's symmetry, right? And the presence of the dead, like we can talk about that later. So you have nothing except there were 300 prisoners, but there were also 30 Japanese soldiers who decided to hide in 44, at the end of 44, and were able to hide until 47. The spring of 47. They spent 2 years in the jungle. You probably know the story of Onoda. That's even more impressive. Onoda lived in the Philippines, and he was able to hide until the mid-70s, right? Not knowing that it was over and returning to Japan in the 70s. The big difference is that Onoda was a hero coming back in the 70s in Japan. Well, he was retreated as a hero, and there's a famous scene of him returning to Tokyo and seeing his parents that he hadn't seen for 30 years, of course, very old, and that's those guys, the 30 who escaped the end of the battle and returned in 45. They were not heroes. Nobody wanted to talk about the war at that time, and they went back to their families, had to hide their past, and were not recognized at all as former veterans of Peleliu. So it's very complex. For the Palauans, again, we have these interviews that help us write their story.
So precisely, one of the most striking aspects of your book is the fact that you try to give a voice back to marginalized, erased groups, the Palauans, as you said, but also the Koreans, the Chinese slave laborers, displaced populations as well, which are very largely absent from US military accounts. So how does this decentering of perspective change of our understanding of the conflict? Could we say that your book participates in a post-colonial or critical historiographical approach using literary writing to restore visibility to those whom official history have erased?
Well, that's the reason why it took me so long to, of course, to write this 250 pages, is that, again, the had to, again, combine many historiographies. That includes the Koreans that, as you know, were part of the Japanese army at that time, many Korean slave laborers, many comfort women from Korea, many men from Okinawa as well. And for the American army, I was also interested in the African Americans who participated in the battle, and the Native Americans, right? There's a famous...
The Navarros, right?
Yeah, the Navarros, absolutely. The cut talkers, right? Chester Nez was one of them, who experienced also the battle as a major psychological crisis because of their experience of extreme violence for the first time. So yes, I had to combine that in my narrative to try again to have something like the French say histoire parts égales, right? Try to again approach the history of the battle from many different perspectives.
So to prepare for our conversation, I was rereading your book during the weekend, and I came across that sentence, which I think encapsulates very well what you're talking about now. I'm going to read it in French and attempt a live translation after that. Les espaces sont toujours plus connectés que ne le croient, et surtout depuis plus longtemps. Spaces are always more connected than one believes, and first of all, for much longer. And I think it's what you've been doing with that book, not only talking about the battle itself, but the very long history of colonial enterprises in that space of the world. So
just to come back to that point, what I use as an epigraph in the book, it's Carlo Ginzburg's famous presentation of interconnectedness. He writes, no island is an island, right? No island is an island, right? Of course, it's inspired by John Dunn. And I was interested in two things. First of all, this idea that I use that expression. I apologize for that, saying like, it's lost in the middle of nowhere. No, it's not lost in the middle of nowhere, because of course it's an island, but has always been connected. That was my point. It's not, it's not. We have this impression that, which is so Western, that global history comes as a massive catastrophe that's finally connects the spaces with the outside world. That's not true. Again, these islands have been connected for a very long time with the rest of the other islands in the Pacific, and it's a very, very complex story that I try to tell. So part of the story was also, again, Carlo Ginzburg is also an historian of traces, and as you know, I'm very much interested in traces in that project.
So let's talk about traces, and in particular of traces of death.
Okay.
Indeed, you describe Peleliu as a vast open-air cemetery where Japanese soldiers remain still lie in a collapsed cave. You showed a few examples earlier.
Yeah.
How did you confront the material presence of death, ever present yet invisible, during your stay in Peleliu? And how has encountering these haunted sites influence your approach to history and your writing at the intersection of investigation, memory, and personal reflection?
So it's if there is any good example of what Jay Winters calls sites of memory and sites of mourning, again, Peleliu is a very good example of that. Memory and mourning, right? In the absence of any form of doctorism, because it's so far that there is no doctorism. People will go there. Actually, the only people I met were either Japanese tourists who went there. We spent, literally a couple of hours. They had a little bus, went to Bloody Nose Ridge, to the Japanese Memorial, to the little museum, was now closed, and came back to the main island. So there's no doctorism, right? So haunted by death, yes, right? That's why I use this notion of ghosts. There are several layers in that story of ghosts. The first one is the local. Let's start with the local population, these 500 plus people who live there, right? I remember, of course, asking people there what they thought about that, and they remembered their grandparents warning them the presence of ghosts, right? Saying that stay away from the caves. That's where the ghosts are, right? And telling the story of the Battle of Peleliu using almost the words of legends or tales, right? Which is absolutely fascinating, right? Ghost stories, local ghost stories, right? There's of course the American ghost stories. We think that again, that's 44. At the surprise, that was really kind of a shock when the book was published in France on August the 29th. And actually, in August, just checking again the news, I get this kind of, now I'm probably the only one here checking the news about Palau. Anyway, checking the news, I saw the story of a young American. His name is John Henry Newstrom, who fought in the 5th Marines, like Eugene Sledge, from St. Paul, Minnesota, was killed in action on September the 28th, 1944, and his remains were found, were found in 2018, sent to Hawaii for identification in March of 2025. A unit actually where one of our former students works, actually, right? I mean, Pete, we have a former graduate student who works there in Hawaii, right, in the identification unit, I think, in Hawaii. And identified in March of 2025 and returned to his family in August. That person is literally one of the many ghosts. There are still a few missing in action, right? Most of the bodies, American bodies, have been repatriated. But now you have the Japanese. And with this major crisis of following the rituals of cremation that are so essential for the Japanese, right? I met 3 years ago, an old man, 92, was severely, he had cancer. I don't know if he's still there, but anyway, Sashio Kageyama, who lived in Mito, so 120 kilometers northeast of Tokyo. And he was the president of an association of mourning families of the Battle of Peleliu. His father had founded that association. His father was not a veteran of Peleliu, but anyway, This man, 92-year-old, went to Peleliu 55 times. 55 times. Why? To collect bodies. To collect bodies. And that story, that was when I was ending my book. I'd already started working. And when I met this person, I said, okay, I mean, that makes sense. I think that makes sense to write a book. And he gave me images like this one, where you see Japanese in the 1970s visiting Peleliu and collecting bodies and organizing ritual cremations as a way to pay respect for the dead and make sure that none of their dead become a ghost, right? And that's, of course, you see, of course, the emotion here on the left. That's something that shows the presence of Peleliu today in Japanese memory, even if the memory of World War II itself is extremely painful for many people in Japan. And finally, yes, the ghosts, I said the ghost of the local ghost, right, for the Palauan population. Again, you have to imagine when the Palauans return in 45, their islands is radically different from the one I saw. Of course, it's completely destroyed. The Americans who are there, there's a small units welcoming the Palauans. They give them sunglasses because it's so white that they need sunglasses, of course. And one of them, who after that went to the US in the 50s in a kind of exchange or in a kind of program to get his education in a US college, he compares that in the 60s or 70s with ice, right? Which makes, of course, no sense for a Palauan, but snow, right? A snow-capped landscape, completely destroyed. And among the many destructions, there's a destruction of two things: the Odessangel, that are the stones under which their heroes were, the most famous ancestors were buried, and also the Olange, that are almost the landmarks, right? Because you have to imagine also a world where history is not written around events, but more around landmarks. So, and you have a description of that in the 60s or 70s, these oral histories of the older generation crying when they come back because everything has been destroyed, their houses, but even worse, the landmarks have been destroyed. So literally saying, what are we going to share with the younger generation, right? Because our world has been completely destroyed. What made the boundaries, we knew that what happened at that specific place, because there was a landmark, everything has been destroyed by the war.
So there is another ghost in your book that's very much haunting it. That's Eugene Sledge.
Yeah, and that's my ghost, right?
In order to conclude our conversation, before we invite questions from the audience, I would like us to go back to the very point of departure of your book. Indeed, Eugene Sledge appears throughout Les Fantômes de l'île de Peleliu, from his secret notes in a pocket Bible to his refusal to return to the site of the battle after the war in order to visit the battlefield. So what did following his footsteps and studying his archives teach you about how individuals transform wartime experiences into shared memory? And beyond Sledge, how does your work on Peleliu illuminate broader questions about war, trauma, veteran silences, and the challenges of passing memory across generations?
So the end of your question about the transmission from one generation to the next, Sledge had two sons, Henry and John. What is really fascinating about them is one of them, John, actually refuses to talk about his father and Peleliu. He even refused to watch the HBO movie that you've probably seen, The Pacific, It was a screening organized for the family. Refused to see that because for him that reminded him of the nightmares of his father. The other one, and you know, he became, believe it or not, he became a very good specialist of the old houses of Mobile. Right. Among them, of course, his family house, which for him, of course, I'm not, you know, but of course symbolized the pre-war, you know, era where, you know, his family before Peleliu and Okinawa, where his father was, you know, that's his father's childhood in many ways, right? Mobile in the late 30s, early 40s. Henry became a specialist of World War II. I mean, not a specialist, but he gives lectures on his father issues. But there's a clear, you know, there's a different approach, and that says a lot, I think, about intergenerational trauma. Now about Sledge, I want to, maybe we can end with that. So Sledge suffered from nightmares and trauma until the end of his life. Sledge was an amazing teacher. Sledge was really an amazing teacher. That's what I heard from many of his former students. Amazing teacher, great specialist of ornithology, right? And his passion for birds literally saved his life. Saved his life in Peleliu, because you have amazing descriptions of moments when he observes birds, and in a way saved his life after, because that was the focus of his research and made him forget, I think, the memories of the battle. The key figure, not the key character, but one of the figures in the book, you have not mentioned that yet, Benjamin, is a bird. And one specific bird. I start and end my book with that. When I listen to the all archives of these veterans, I mean, most of them are dead today, but they have been recorded in the 1980s for most of them. I heard many times these veterans recorded in the 1980s mentioning birds. I was like, okay, my English is terrible. I'm like, birds, really? I mean, this island, I think, destroyed. I mean, is it even possible? Yes, there were birds, and among them, a bird that I heard myself, and they don't know his name, so they just imitate him. So he records dozens of records of dozens of veterans imitating the bird song. And the bird song, you have to imagine, it's like a creaking sound of a rusty swing. I'm not going to imitate that, but like, and
please,
what?
Please do.
No. And that's what they imitate. And they say in their, you know, oral archives that the first time they came back to Peleliu, for most of them in 1984, they of course did not recognize anything. The battlefield was radically different, but they heard the bird song. They heard the bird song. And the story is fascinating because during the battle itself, in 1944, there was a rumor about the bird that whoever heard the bird song will soon see his own death. Because what they thought is that they were actually, that was the Japanese were imitating the bird song as a way to communicate between each other. And that meant that the Japanese were not far, right? So in many ways, that became part of the trauma. Two things are essential in the trauma, as we all know when we are interested in trauma. Of course, yeah, the visual thing, yes, but the smell, which is an essential part of trauma. And Sledge said that for him, the smell of coconut was absolutely invariable, because that brought him back to Pavuvu, before Peleliu, and to this kind of, you know, rotten smell that, you know, immediately brought him back to 1944. And the sounds. In that case, the bird sound is really an essential part of his traumatic memory. So my book ends with that question, which I think is really at the core of my project in many ways, and that's the following. I'm thinking of the Ghosts of Peleliu, and that's the first sentence of the epilogue. What becomes of ghosts when they have no one left to to hunt, right? And that's the key question, right? Because that's what happens today. The Japanese progressively turn away from the battle, the greatest generation disappears, and the Palauans themselves, for them, it's not their history, so what becomes of ghosts when they have no longer anyone to
I
know?
think we now have an answer. They hunt an historian, which is still making it wider.
Clearly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you so much. We'll welcome, of course, questions from the audience.
Bruno, I look forward to the English version.
Yes.
One of the things about these battlefields that you go back today and all the vegetation has grown over the years, but back then there were tens of thousands of tons of munitions that blasted apart the vegetation, and it was a completely different hellscape for the people who lived. So I'm just wondering, as a historian, how do you imagine the battlefield now that it's all grown over?
It's very difficult to imagine it. We have a few photographs. We have some excellent photographs of Bloodiness Ridge, of several places where you see the complete devastation of the vegetation. So that's a good way to imagine it. In many ways, Eugene Sledge gives also good descriptions of the landscapes. That's a very good point, Pete. In 1984, a young diver, he was not an historian, was going there to do some diving. Most people go there for diving, actually. Not to Peleliu, but to Palaus. He wrote a letter. He was young at the time. I actually called him because I wanted to know more about his trip. He wrote to Sledge in '84, asking naive questions about trophies, which I think was not a good idea, knowing that trophies at the time for some of these veterans were actually bodies, right, some body parts. Anyway, Sledge was very respectful and responded to his email, yes. And at some point said, okay, I'm intrigued that you decided to travel to Peleliu, right? And he said, okay, I know, as a specialist of, he was an ornithologist, he was interested in science, that of course the jungles now covered everything, but even if I had the opportunity to go there, I would be almost afraid to suffer some kind of trauma and be brought back to the landscapes of 1944, right? So I think for them, we again recognized nothing when they came back in 1994. They probably saw behind the jungle, which I was unable to do, of course, behind this jungle that covers, I would say, most that it's more than covers. It really eats everything, like it's growing and growing and growing, right? They were able to identify, of course, specific places associated, as you know, with specific deaths or specific friends who died there, right? And until today, not today, because now it's more difficult to travel to Peleliu, but you have families who go there and who go there for their, of course, to memory of their own grandparents or whatever, but also because they want to see places where some of their grandfather's friends were killed, right? So it's a very, very interesting point, and that's interesting again to see that it comes from one who has a battlefield experience, because as you know better than anyone else, battlefields are unique for people who have that kind of experience, because what you see is not just a landscape, it's also specific memories, associated with specific moments, specific deaths.
Yeah, and I would second the idea of smell, bringing you right back. I can smell burning trash, and I'm right back in Baghdad.
I'm sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Peter.
Professor?
Thank you.
Was there something particularly strategic about that island that would cause the Japanese to risk or expend the lives of so many men to defend? Was there something there that they were defending?
The airfield. That's the point about the airfield.
Yeah. Or, why did the battle take place there at all?
Probably better, the piece has just published a book on MacArthur invasion of the Philippines. So it's part of the history of the Philippines and that airfield, which seems to be, many historians consider it as not being really an objective. Probably you have a totally different reading of that, right? Based on your, if you want to.
So when they decided to invade Leyte, the Americans, they canceled the invasion of Yap, which is a different island, but Nimitz was adamant that they take Peleliu because there's an airfield there that's within medium bomber range of the Philippines, and that's the reason they went there. Now, because of the carnage on Peleliu, there's a lot of second guessing by Monday morning generals saying we should have canceled that one too. But there were good reasons to go there. But it's all about ports and airfields when you talk about the Pacific War.
So that was your objective, the airfield, yeah. That they took actually quite easily. They took them only 3 or 4 days to take the airfield. After that, Bragal was another thing, of course, yeah. I can see, yes, David.
Thank you, Bruno. That was a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
You mentioned that Sledge's memoir was published in 1981.
81, yeah.
Assuming he was writing it 30 or 35 years after.
Yeah, no, he was writing them regularly, and that it was a long process of writing.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, well, that maybe answers my question. I was curious why you thought that the myth of the war, the mythology around it, the myth of the good war, why that did not influence his recollections more than it did, because oftentimes, of course, veterans' memories are colored by intervening events and also by representations of the war. There are even cases of Vietnam War veterans whose memories of the war are shaped by Hollywood movies.
That's very true. That's very true. So there's something unique about, maybe not unique about Sledge. First of all, so let me say a few words about that. As you mentioned, Benjamin, the basis of the book is actually notes that he took in a pocket Bible during which was of course forbidden during the battle itself, right? So that's the original document that is kept at Auburn University, right? So we have that. And progressively, it was his wife who encouraged him to write something for his sons. And then after that, it was published. But in many ways, there are several ways to answer your question. I think his own experience was radically different from the experience of many veterans of World War II. And I would say that I'm always, and again, I'm not a specialist of World War II, I'm always kind of skeptical about the use of greatest generation. There are so many generations in this generation of World War II. And the Pacific War is radically different from the experience of many other veterans. And in many ways, his approach was, I don't want to say critical of that, but he wanted to tell the story of these two battles specifically, right? That do not fit well with the myth of the heroes because again of the huge losses again on both sides and because of the atrocities committed. But I agree, it's really very fascinating to see that in many ways he did not incorporate more of this myth of, he never wanted to turn his comrades in arms into heroes. He was again very empathetic, but never considered them as heroes. That said, and I think it's not seeing that as a good war. One of the most fascinating and one of the most moving parts of the book is at the very end. You have a list of names. List of 26 names. His company was composed of 235 men. 85 of them survived Peleliu, meaning not wounded or killed. And 26 of them were not wounded or killed at the end of Okinawa, right? And he gives the list of these men at the end of this book. I've seen many war memorials, of course, in my life and career, and most of them World War I, of course. List of the dead most of the time, except in Australia, where actually the survivors are also on the war memorials. But this memorial to the survivors is as moving maybe as the memorials to the dead in many ways, right? it's a way to, different to respond to your question. But yes, that was one of my questions. Why was he able to differentiate himself from this kind of big narrative that you see everywhere, right? That's kind of fascinating. That's what makes this book so interesting. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Bruno. This is a really wonderful conversation. And I'm sure the book, I've got to read it. So my question is about language.
Yeah.
So Eugene Sledge, in some ways in spite of himself, has got the full Ken Burns treatment. Mm-hmm. But that's not how his memoir and he would be understood in France.
Yeah.
Was his memoir translated?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, actually made them translate.
Reception, and so I'd love to hear a bit about the reception of that. And then because he hasn't gotten this French version of the Ken Burns treatment, how your book, how that is part of the reception of your book. And then my second question, which is I guess in some ways more for the graduate students in the room, is do you think sort of the Eugene memoir framework helps in this book at all? And if so, is it Peleliu that is the place?
Yeah.
Or is it Sledge's memoir?
That's a very good question. Thanks, Lydia. For the second question, this is less a book about Sledge and more a book about the space. It's a book about spaces, right? And what I mean by spaces, it's both imaginary spaces, it's mental spaces, it's of course, landscapes and traces and everything. Yes, and in many ways, you cannot distinguish Sledge's experience and Sledge's writing from that spaces, right? I mean, like that's a very, very good point, and the narrative is built around that. As for the reception in France, in many ways, that's a very good question. It's very new for most readers, right? They don't know much, but they don't know Peleliu, right? They didn't know Sledge, except those who had. It was very successful. I mean, the book was very successful. I was surprised. I actually encouraged a publisher to translate it into French, Belles Lettres, and they did it. And they were, it was very successful. But it's more a form of initiation to an aspect of World War II that most readers don't know. And it's also, I think, that what strikes the French readers is a reflection on violence and trauma, right? That specific form of violence. There were not many cases of that specific kind. I keep saying to my undergrads in this, or even my grad students, that's the topic of my seminar this semester, the violence as a language. That violence is a language, and in many ways, that specific language here is a language, it's a racial language, and it's really a racial war. I'm not, of course, the first one to say that. John Doerr, among many others, have made a point about that. And for the French, it's very difficult to understand, right? For them, World War II is a war against fascism or Nazism, right? It's not the racial war that many Americans have experienced in the Pacific. So, in many ways, when I have these conversations with French colleagues or French readers, I try to make them understand also how this racial war impacted the American home front and the circulation of this racial imagery from the front line to the home front and back, right? I mean, among the many forms of circulation, the circulation, unfortunately, of trophies, right? I mean, you see people sending skulls to Japanese skulls to their families. I mean, and it's not. I mean, first of all, it's not a legend, and it was known. I mean, you have to imagine. I don't have the precise date. I think it's in March of '44. On Life magazine, it's a picture of the week. The picture of the week on one of the issues of Life magazine, I think it's March 24, it's a young American from Arizona, and the caption says that it's an American woman writing to a boyfriend a thank you note to thank him for the Japanese skull that he sent her. And you have her writing, almost posing, like a vanitas, right? And with a skull, right? And it was the front page of Life. August 44, Roosevelt receives letter opener made of the bone of a Japanese. So it's something that everybody knows, absolutely everybody, right? So for the French, yes, it's something new because John Doerr has not been translated, and in many ways, when John Doerr's book was published in 1986, a long time ago. And by the way, now it has been criticized for good reasons by many American historians, but yes, that brings a lot to the conversation on World War II in France. We need to, which is kind of surprising. It's a global conflict, but we write these global conflicts from a very national perspective, right? A very national perspective. And we co-organized this conference 5 years ago. It's going to be published by Cambridge next year on globalizing the history of World War I and World War II. That's a major, it seems obvious. It's a global conflicts. No, it's not obvious. Again, when you go to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, I was kind of shocked to see that everything starts in 41. Literally, everything starts in 41. That's World War I starts in World War II starts in 41, right? There's absolutely almost nothing on Europe except 44. So yes, and you have exactly the same perspective in France or in other places where the Pacific War is totally ignored, right? It seems obvious, but New Orleans has money, right? They can definitely change their narrative. So I don't even understand why, but we need absolutely, especially I'm talking to the younger generation of grad students, that's your job, right? Literally, you need to do that because that's kind of surprising again that in 2025, we're still working on World War II or World War I in those terms. We need to, again, denationalize these histories, and we need also, in many ways, to demilitarize them. Not meaning that we need to understand these layers of memory too. Combat is something, but if you don't understand that the landscapes where these people fought, there is a story behind that, where there is a long history, several layers of memory. And I'm always surprised that for the history of the Battle of Verdun, we focus exclusively on the battle, and we forget about the villages that were there before, the life before the Battle of Verdun, right? So we need to think about in those terms and try to think again about the long-term history of military history, and include more, as many people do now, on environmental history, history of memory, and many other things. That's a long way to respond to your question. Yeah. Oh, Jim is. Yes, you need to.
Like Pete, I'm also very excited to read the English language version.
As soon as possible, Jim. As soon as possible.
My question is about methodologies.
Sure.
And you asked about language, I'm asked about methods.
Sure.
You were interested in combining history and anthropology.
Yes.
You talked a lot about the field work of the sort of visual experience.
Sure.
Of being on the island. But you ended with that interesting epigraph about ghosts having no one left to haunt.
Yeah.
Did any kind of oral history with the hundreds of people that lived on the island, did their memory come into this story at all when you were doing this sort of field part of your story?
Yes. So that was part, of course, of the work. I spent quite a lot of time there, and the interactions with them, and the interactions with the Japanese. So it's a long story. But in many ways, the first time I went there, went only to Peleliu, didn't go to Japan. I went to Japan the second, third, and fourth time was only in Japan. And in many ways, the story changed. First of all, meeting with this old Japanese completely, and that was literally the last year, right? Completely changed my perspective, right? More or less showing that the point was about memory, mourning, traces, and death, right? So completely reorganized the narrative. But before that, the interactions with people, getting to know them better, getting to know also the places better, right? Where they live, right? Literally where they live. What it means to live on the battlefield, right? On the graveyard, right? Is it something that they think about all the time? or is it something natural, right, that they completely forget? That was part also of the my kind of reflection, right? So that's the kind of anthropological approach, if you want, right? Trying to incorporate more about my interactions, our interactions with the local population, and trying again to understand the memories of the battlefield through their eyes, not simply as the Palauan memory of the battle, but literally the memories of those who live there, who still live there, right? And that's interesting because let me maybe make the point about that. There was a small museum that was organized by a local historian. Very interesting, by the way, composed almost exclusively of objects sent by veterans' families. So after some of these veterans died, their families sent to this local museum, or brought actually to this local museum, you know, memories. You have also the tourists who had collected, so it was like a complete mess, right? Like, not complete mess, but also, I'm not, you know, it's not being judgmental. I was very worried about the fact that, I mean, it was extremely hot, extremely humid. It's very hot and humid, of course. And there was no, I mean, like, clearly that museum, there were lots of articles that were progressively, I mean, yes, that there were, I don't know if, you know, anything could have survived a long time, the heat and humidity. That said, the museum closed. The museum closed because of COVID, because the only person in charge died of COVID, that historian. And the museum closed. I don't even know where the collections are. They're in boxes somewhere. And I mean, that's the only time I think I can say that I saw things that nobody's going to see again. Honestly, that's it. It's a history that has completely disappeared, right? I have literally pictures of that museum. I mean, that's gone forever, right? And that's part of your question too. I was always struck by the fact that, you know, this guy was a bit strange, and he was seen by many people there as a kind of eccentric specialist of the battle. Nobody cared, honestly. Nobody cared. It's very fascinating to see that I was totally passionate. That was my project. I saw many people were almost wondering what I was doing here, right? I was not a diver. I was spending more than 2 hours visiting the battlefield. Why was I why were we on our bikes, right? You know, in the middle of the jungle. What was the point, right? And that was really more this kind of, that's what I call disorientation. This idea of you don't know where you are, but people with whom you have these conversations don't understand what you are doing, right? I mean, and we assume, by the way, that, you know, people are here to answer your questions. No, they are not. They have their own life. I mean, like they are not, you know, they don't have time, or they don't care. They are very generous with their time. But again, so that's very intrusive too, to come to their, you know, houses and ask questions. And, you know, by the way, seeing those houses, you still see shells everywhere. You hope that, you know, the demining was done well, but they are not. So, you know, but I mean, you don't know. It's a very strange. It's the only time I saw such a strange relationship with a battlefield. You know, this idea that the past was present, but at the same time it was far. It was far because that was not part of their everyday life. That's a long way again to answer your question. There's someone there. Yes. Hello.
I noticed a big difference between the memory of the combatant nations, the Axis nations, between the European theater and the Pacific theater. You mentioned at the start that Eugene Sledge felt no sympathy for the Japanese.
Sure.
Was this lack of sympathy in the memory because of the propagandized racial view of the Japanese, or was it because of the atrocities they committed, like the mutilation and all that?
I think both. I mean, the racial component is very important, yes. The former enemy is seen the same way, in many ways, right? The former racial enemy. But also, of course, how do you turn away from that, right? How do you turn away from that when you have mutilated bodies, or seen bodies mutilated by your friends, or when you have seen, you know, bodies of your friends mutilated, right? I mean, it's something that you don't forget, right? And don't forget, of course. So that's part, of course, of this very specific relationship with memory, with trauma and with memory. Absolutely, yeah. And I think Sledge is very representative of that generation in many ways. I think as far as I know. Thanks. It's already 6. I don't know if there's one.
Right time to
Like one final question. I mean,
final question, yeah.
No? I don't see anyone. So
in that case,
thank you very much. Thank you.